2025. A lot of people are pushing this as a Rapture day, although I've heard the same thing every September 23rd since 2017. And so far, none of the Rapturees have offered to let me borrow their car in their absence. So you're going to transcend the material plane and go to a higher place, but you're not willing to give up your car. Okay. So based on that, I figured it was a nothing burger. And as far as I know, nobody has been raptured. I heard Charlie Kirk went to Crisis Actor Island somewhere in New Zealand, Valhalla, which in the Hulu series, The Tempest, the assassin guy that protects the widow works for this thing called the Valkyrie group. And the Valkyries are the big blonde heroic Norse goddess women who escort the fallen heroes to Valhalla. And if you look at Erica Kirk, she fits the bill. And it ties in all of these various references that we've seen, but to Hulu, The Tempest, which, as we talked about yesterday, has even more connections when you realize that Charlie Kirk was there in South Korea days before he was shot, being prayed over by a congregation. They were praying for him. Very interesting just to see how he's there in South Korea meeting with a group that is essentially the group that the Hulu TV series bases the new Republican Party on. So in other words, Kirk basically plays the role on the world stage of the person in The Tempest before it even aired, down to the detail of where he was shot. And something more, because I've been talking about this concept of the blindfolded skeptic, how you don't need to solely rely upon malfunctions in their visual presentation to debunk or recognize a hoax or a staged event. You have to look at all the surrounding circumstances and context and the political utility, implementations, and the actors. So this time around, I didn't spend much time talking about the actors, but the eyewitnesses alone should bring about reasonable doubt as to whether the thing really happened. And some of the eyewitnesses describe Kirk getting shot in the chest, bleeding out. Others describe him slumping forward. So explain to me, those who might still believe it happened, why do the only eyewitnesses, now consider this, these are the only eyewitnesses that get mainstream coverage, get it wrong? You'd think at least one of them would say, yeah, he got shot. No. The witnesses that were interviewed by the media all got it wrong. And they're laughing, they're smiling, they're not even emoting. And it reminds me, if you go back to 1963 after the JFK assassination, the eyewitnesses that were recorded were the same. There was one girl at the JFK assassination who said something about the dog in the car, waving at the president, and he has his dog with him. I mean, what I'm saying is that those eyewitnesses, I mean, maybe they were there from the drill the week before, but there's other reasons that I haven't even looked into for considering this thing to be something of a hoax. And videos have just been put up today on X, which I've been retweeting, that are really calling into question the post-shooting response. It's not being, I mean, we talked about the lack of EMT, where's the ambulances for the size of the crowd, but where are the police? And then you look at the head of security just sitting there, everyone's lackadaisical, walking around. Like, this was not evacuated. They didn't evacuate it. Skyfish says, the recent Deprogram book is great, Tim. Oh, thank you. The handbook for the recently deprogrammed is selling on Amazon right now. I tried to keep my own inventory and sign them, but look, I'm just going to say it. Amazon sabotaged that order. There's no other way to explain it. Adam Mann says, a friend of mine worked at WTC. She said they were told not to work that day. Yeah, there were some people who said, well, some people died. Some people were in the towers. No, what we know for a fact is that there were 88 some drills going on that day. Mass casualty drills, all based on the theme of terrorism. So if you consider the number of drills going on 9/11 in the vicinity, it was a closed movie set. They used the drills to shut everyone else out of the environment. Dark Ghost Wind says, this seems to be a common thing with these psyops, people walking around as if nothing happened during these major incidents. Yeah, so now that I'm thinking about the recent drill that was performed there, they could have had a bunch of mass casualty role players in the crowd for a lot of reasons. To incite panic, to control the perceptions is essentially what we're doing. You know, I was alluding to Space Cadets, the 10-episode long TV show where 10 astronauts thought that they were in low Earth orbit, or 10 wannabe astronauts. But it turns out they were only in a simulation. And this was revealed at the season finale, and some of them cried. And so then people would ask, well, how do you get this group of people to all fall for something like that? Easy. 5 actors were mixed in with 5 dupes. So the 10 people in the spacecraft were simulating going in space, and the 5 who weren't in on it were prevented from raising any doubts, conspiracy theories. So the actors, who are basically like a secret society, they're totally controlling everything. They all know each other. They know who the fools are. They're able to manage the perceptions of the fools. So if one of them starts to question it, the other actors could cut in and prevent 2 of the people who aren't controlled from putting 2 and 2 together, piecing it together. So now you can understand why this whole area of discourse of media criticism is full of controlled opposition agents. It's to prevent us from arriving at the right conclusions and calling out the simulation. But my contention now with this Charlie Kirk psyop, yeah, it's a manufactured martyr. He's not dead. The whole thing was 100% staged. But this can be discerned not just by trying to argue whether or not the blood is real or CGI enhanced. I mean, the visual deconstruction part of it isn't the strongest point, because you have to look at the space program, for example. It doesn't matter how fake it looks. If people are told it's real, they're going to believe it's real. It must be real because it looks so fake. Like with Starman, Musk said that. So the apparent realness of it, according to your visual literacy, is not an argument. It's not considered a valid point. Now, we know it is, sure. But for the sake of argument, we have to look at what are the strong points that are irrefutable. And for me, the burden of proof is now on the believer. If you think it's real, or it might be real, your burden of proof is to explain the deviations from standard protocol, which is a hoax indicator. And one of the phrases I've been using lately is hoax indicator. Real life events don't have hoax indicators. And so we can list all of the hoax indicators associated with the Charlie Kirk event and say, that's your burden of proof, believer. If you think this is real, you need to explain. We'll put deviations from standard protocol with EMT, police, evacuation, and then we'll put down alleged crisis actors. Because if you want to explain to us, why does that blonde girl laugh and talk about him getting shot in the chest with blood spurting out? Why does the other guy talk about him slumping forward? That's your burden, not ours. What's up, Layla Schmidt? Here is your blue wrench. Thank you for joining. I would add to this the Hulu series Tempest. about the widow, who is the storm, who is the tempest, and Erica Trump was called the storm on stage the other day. So the concurrent programming, the predictive programming, I would also put all the JFK references surrounding Kirk on his final days. From Roger Stone or the Joe Rogan show, they're talking about JFK when they get the call that Charlie Kirk was shot. Talking to Charlie Sheen, no doubt. No less. And Charlie Sheen, having just put out this documentary, Charlie, on September 10th. I was in the grocery store yesterday and I see a People's Magazine and I see Charlie Sheen's face. And it says, "Charlie, I'm alive. It's a miracle." The Superman stuff is intriguing. And, this is another point too, the engineered narratives around this. So this ties in. These are hoax indicators, engineered narratives. So that one of the things is Candace Owens finds out there's no blood behind him, no gore. And some people thought, well, maybe she's going to call it out as a hoax. I said no. She's not an investigator. None of these influencer conspiracy theorists, Ian Carroll, Candace Owens, they're not investigating. They're not researching. They're strictly propagandizing and spoon-feeding a target demographic engineered narratives. Engineered narratives are hoax indicators. Those don't happen in real life. Truther bait, red herrings, misleading narratives to direct you into a conspiracy theory take that the state approves of, like Israel did it. All of those truther bait clues are indicators it's not real. When real events happen, you don't have a bunch of conspiracy theories swarming about. And all of the conspiracy theories are false. All of the conspiracies are actually a meta-conspiracy to steer those who don't buy the mainstream into a controlled narrative that doesn't get them to consider that maybe the whole thing was fake. So the Superman thing is interesting because what you have is Candace Owens is like, there's no blood behind him because I have this extra footage I've seen. So now we're like, okay, what's going on here? Well, then the story comes out that Charlie Kirk's neck was so strong, or his spine caught the bullet, so nobody died. So he saved lives by holding the bullet in. Now, that is an obviously ridiculous story. You're meant to say it's ridiculous. They want the conspiracy theory crowd to say that can't be true. And that's exactly what they're saying. It's a cover-up. And Candace Owens has run with that. She says, no, it's a cover-up. The ridiculous miracle story is being pushed to hide the fact that it was a smaller caliber than what we saw. So the shooter couldn't have been the shooter because the bullet would have gone through him, is the logic here. The implication being a closer shooter. And last night, Owens was going nuts talking about how there was a tunnel underneath the stage and he popped up the sewer lid and he shot him in the neck. So now you have the closer shooter theory vindicated by the obvious cover-up saying that he caught the bullet with his neck. So the ridiculous narrative actually validates the conspiracy theorists, who all, again, point directly to Israel. Netanyahu shot him. By the way, Netanyahu dies in the Superman movie. He gets dropped from the sky by Hawk Girl. They don't even conceal that's who it's meant to be, which is kind of funny. But they bring up the Superman Man of Steel thing, and then the shooter 17 minutes later shows up in Dairy Queen next to a Superman poster. But not only is he next to the Superman poster, just his face in that image looks like the Lex Luthor from the new Superman. Synchro Morpheus pointed this out. It's almost like they used an AI merging of the two faces to create that association. But why does this tie in? Well, because Superman is not just some ridiculous comic book superhero. Superman is Christ-coded. So if you haven't seen it, Superman loses his first battle and he talks about it. He says, I lost my first battle. 3 decades and 3 years and 3 months and 3 days after arriving on Earth. So you have the Savior from space, 33, Savior from heaven, heaven sent, 33 years old at the time of the movie. And he gets his power from the sun. He flies up into the sun. So if you look into the iconography of Superman, the Savior with his powers from the sun, the solar-powered Savior, 33 years old, that's all Christy. It's all Christification. Dark Ghostwind says they have deified Charlie Kirk like how George Floyd was deified. He's died and was reborn as a figure of worship. Yeah, this is a manufactured martyr. They manufactured him as a martyr. And this was the agenda from the day Turning Point USA was founded. And as I called out, even last year in a blog, quite explicitly, I said, you're going to see Turning Point being a reference to when there's a shift, a political shift in the direction of the Turner Diaries, which is Christian nationalism. And what are we having happen right now? There are sold out Charlie Kirk events all over. And these aren't just political events. These are revivals. When I saw him being prayed over in South Korea, they're crying and they're praying. And we went over this last night in detail. I put a breakdown of 20 hoax indicators. The Hulu thing is strong, though. The Hulu thing is worth looking at. If you haven't seen The Tempest, Charlie is there in the role of that character in real life before it streams on September 10th, where he dies just like the character. The widow takes over. And one of the fascinating parts is how Erica Kirk makes her world stage appearance, and she shows vulnerability. She cries on stage, and she's being praised for this. Well, in the Hulu series, the widow is coached. She said, before you could take over your husband's organization, you have to understand that you need to have a moment of vulnerability. No one gets elected president without crying first on TV. And they call it her triple axle. Her triple axle moment is when she goes on stage as the widow and cries and wins everybody over. So we just saw that happen. Not only is she called the storm, and she's called the widow, and she's taking over TPUSA. In the movie, it would be the New Republicans, but these are corresponding. These are entertainment parallels. But she did her triple axle a couple of days ago and won everybody over. So this Hulu series is tracking with real life consistently. That's another hoax indicator. And if you think it's real, you need to explain this Hulu thing. But then it gets to the point where right after, the next thing that happens is someone mentioned this yesterday, that there's this anagram for Kraken built into her name. Well, the Kraken symbolism has been for about 4 years now, or 5 years, attached to the idea of a submarine-borne nuke. And at the end of episode 3, after her triple axle in The Tempest, it goes to a submarine and a missile launches out of it. Andrea says, isn't there a huge thing about widows and masonry? Yeah, the final words of Hiram Abiff before he's killed and then subsequently resurrected, his final words are, is there no help for the widow's son? Now, I think Jesus said that in reference to a woman whose son had died. But the phrase, is there no help for the widow's son, are his final words. And when he says it, he raises his arms up. They call it the distress sign. And hands up, don't shoot is a distress sign that I've connected with the same ceremony. Because so many of these, well, all of the BLM martyrs are actually playing the role of Hiram Abiff, as Kirk was, as JFK was. So when you notice how he raises his arms up before he falls back, and a lot of people have these explanations, it's because he was hit in the spine, it's some kind of a spasm. I'm saying the reason why he raised his arms up is likely connected to this ritual about the widow. And the way that she described herself as a widow, and they've used that word quite a bit, it's more than just symbolism. I mean, it's more than just it is used for its symbolism, I'm saying. So the story, of course, if you get into Hiram Abiff and the resurrection, he's resurrected by King Solomon. And what's interesting is in Turning Point USA's letter, or they published a letter after Kirk's death, they referenced a verse and they referenced King Solomon. Because he's the architect. Hiram Abiff is the architect of Solomon's temple. But, this is the storyline in the Masonic cult revolves around the widow's son. And they say that was the final words of Joseph Smith. Is there no help for the widow's son? Oh, yeah, Dark Ghost, when you just mentioned it. Yeah, I was told by Mormons that I knew that he was tarred and feathered. But nothing about this is coincidental. This is obviously an engineered narrative. Everything that we talked about yesterday, I have, again, hoax indicators. So again, when it comes to believing this stuff or not, most people say, I believe it because it looked real on TV. So you might argue that, okay, it looks real. It doesn't mean it is real. Which it does not. It looks real. It doesn't mean it is. But that's not going to sway anybody. So what you need to inform them of is if you think it's real, you must, because it's your burden of proof, if you're a media advocate, remember, we are devil's advocates. The people who are defending the mainstream are media advocates. So if the media advocate comes in here and says, I think you guys might be wrong, I think it might be real, like Owen Benjamin, I think it happened just like the mainstream media said, and we need to censor the internet because it's dangerous. All right, if you're going to assert that it's real, you need to go through all of our hoax indicators and explain them away. The fact that this fit a predictable template indicates hoaxery. The fact that we were able to say in advance that there's going to be second shooter, third shooter misdirection lines, and we know who was going to promote them, or that I said there's going to be some kind of relevant entertainment content that's mirroring this. And I said that before I knew Tempest existed. Happy Rapture Day, says T-Dog35. What's up, McDirty Work? Duet says double tap the stream. Yeah, thank you for the thumbs ups. So the Zoom conference was okay. I mean, it went just fine. I wasn't able to do video, but I will next time. It was kind of a test, a pilot, because we're going to do weekly Zoom conferences like this. But each week it will be focused on a different event, and we're going to structure it. So I'll talk about some some hoax indicator for about 20 minutes. And then we'll do 10 minutes of calls or dialogue, and then 20 minutes, then 10. And I think if I format it like that, it will flow better and we'll get better results. Dark Ghost Wind says Joseph Smith's brother was named Hiram. Well, there's two Hirams in the Masonic context. There's Hiram Abiff, the architect who's killed, and then there's Hiram of Tyre, a Phoenician king. And I believe he delivers, I got to look into it, in the Bible, something about 666 talents of gold. But anyway, Hiram of Tyre. And this name Tyre, this shows up in all of the BLM psyops. Like right now, we've got Tyree Nichols. That was the Rodney King-like beating that kicked off those protests. We got into that a couple years ago. And then you got Tyreek Hill. That was the football player who was taken out of his car by the police, and it was compared to Rebel Ridge, about the KKK running the cops, this corrupt police department that he has to get his justice for his cousin over. But Tyree, this is a common thing, as you'll see. Then there's Trayvon Martin, of course, Trey. And we've seen a lot of Treys. Actually, no, it was Trey Reed on this last one. And his full name is actually Trayvon Martin Reed. If you can make sense of that, you can look it up. It's ridiculous. Tyler Robinson. Yeah, so there's... And Tyler, by the way, is the Mason who stands guard at the door of the lodge while they're sacrificing goats or whatever they do. So the Tyler is out in front with the sword. Oh, by the way, the actor in Rebel Ridge, the character, his name is Terry. And he was there are so many examples. This is a whole other body of content. We might even do a whole thing on that, on names. PSYOP martyr names. But again, we're not merely calling it fake because it looks fake. That is called low information disbelief. So let me point this out, because I don't like the straw man argument. When this thing first happened, a skeptic that I know said, oh, the big brains are saying it's fake because it's on TV. And I'm like, no, we're not calling it fake because it's on TV. That's the opposite of what we do. But if your assertion there, or your insinuation, is that we should assume it to be real because it's on TV, that's the same logical flaw. So low info disbelief is flawed. It's fake because it's on TV. No, that's not good enough. It's real because it's on TV. No, that's just as bad. That's low info belief. Both of these are non-skeptical. Both of these are knee-jerk and reflexive. What we do is we suspend belief itself. I'm like, I don't know if it's real. It looks real, but I don't know. I need more information. So I wait. I'm like, let's just wait and see if it's real. Let's get more info. Let's wait 33 hours. What happens 33 hours later? They capture the guy. Yeah, it took a 33-hour manhunt. But in that time, in the interim, a lot of stuff comes up that leads us to think that it's not real. So that puts us in the position of informed disbeliever. So it's not that I don't believe it because it's on TV. I don't believe it because I have a lot of additional information that these others don't. The low information believer doesn't know enough to believe it. It's a leap of faith. The low info disbeliever doesn't have enough information to discredit the story. But we, as informed disbelievers, have clarity, not false certainty. These give you certainty, which is false. Oh, I'm certain it's real, or I'm certain it's fake. Well, on what basis? It looks fake isn't good enough. It looked fake when Trump got shot. Sorry, that's not enough information. So again, the informed disbelief weighs more than low info in every instance. And that's what we're aiming for here. So now, if you're going to say it's real and you're a low info believer, you have nothing to stand on. You don't have the intellectual high ground. Nor do you have the moral high ground to tell us to respect the memory or whatever you're saying about these events. Like, you must respect the people who suffer. No. Forget your so-called victims of a tragedy. Your burden of proof, since you're defending the mainstream view, requires that you confront every one of our hoax indicators. And if they can't do that, they have nothing to stand on. So you are correct in saying, I don't believe it. But I don't believe it because of this. And if you can't address this, then your belief is dismissible. Come back when you've done your research. Come back when you've done your due diligence. What typifies our perspectives is due diligence, not reflexive belief or reflexive non-belief. And reflexive non-belief is what truthers do. You know, the general red pillers. Oh, I don't trust the mainstream. But then they gobble down all the red pills. Oh, I don't believe that. That's CNN. Well, what's your basis? Well, it's CNN. They lie. But I believe Alex Jones. I'm drinking the Alex Jones Kool-Aid, and there's a second shooter. T-Dog135 says Scooby-Doo justice. Yeah, and I was asking people at the end of the discussion, what was the turning point for you? What was the turning point that caused you to say that Charlie Kirk's not dead? And for some, it was the Scooby-Doo justice, which means it's like an episode in the cartoon where they solve the mystery in one episode in 30 minutes, and they know who the bad guy is by the end. They unmask the bad guy and put him in jail. I mean, it's just too neat. It doesn't follow the typical crime scene investigation process. And again, deviation from standard protocol. It doesn't, if it flows like a TV show and you've got the manifesto, you know who did it and why, you know his backdrop, you've seen his, you know his backstory, you've seen his family, you've read his manifesto. It's like, okay, the media then essentially serves as the judge and the jury and the executioner. Is the bad guy an actress has lost age? Yeah, okay, so that's one of the things that's built into this, is that there are no patsies. There are only actors. And the shooter would be included in this. And this includes every one of these shooters, who are always rewarded for their performances with fast food. Like, oh, good job, Dylan Roof. Let's go to Burger King, have a Whopper. Because the whole story was a Whopper. I think these are jokes. This guy goes to Dairy Queen next to a Superman poster. Nick Cruz went to Subway and then McDonald's. Luigi Mangione went to McDonald's. So if there's like a mass shooter on the loose, just check the nearby restaurants, the nearby fast food joint. Ollie Goering says this bad guy could be AI. There's a possibility. He could just be an actor. It could be a person. So, okay, I talked about this yesterday, and I would recommend looking this up. Look up on Perplexity legends in the context of Russian intelligence. So legends never die. I've seen this phrase, legends never die, attached to so many death fakers. It's like a reoccurring theme. And so I've said for some time that legends is insider code for death fakers. Well, it turns out that a legend in the context of Russian intelligence agencies refers to plants, spies with backstories that live normal lives and blend in with society for purposes of espionage. Lost Age says, I think it's a combination of AI and actors. You know, that could be true. Because, you know, we talk about hyper-realistic masks, which have been employed for decades, where you wouldn't know if the person you're seeing is real or not. It's foolproof. You don't need AI to create a deep fake. So the question is not really, is he AI? The question is he a deep fake? And the answer is yes. The shooter is a deep fake. Whether it's AI or a mask, or maybe they're going to do cosmetics later because he's still young and he can change his appearance. It could be any one of these. So actor with makeup and prosthetics could be. It could be an actor with a AI face superimposed. So it could be any one of these things, but what we can say is he's a deep fake, a legend. That's why when I said this, I noticed, I looked into this term because I was thinking about the legacy of Charlie Kirk. So I thought there's got to be some kind of connection with legacy and legend here. And they turn him into a martyr, maybe even a saint because of the miracle with his Superman neck. Plain Dakota says, when I watch some of these major influencers talk about the inconsistencies, I'm wondering how close they are to getting on the hoax train if they're naturally occurring influencers and not pre-co-opted. Yeah, this is going to be the revelation. This is going to we're going to find out. And by the way, Charlie Sheen said, this is not a comeback, it's a revelation. Interesting turn of phrase. But to your point here, those who continue to push the controlled opposition talking points, what we term MSM plus, which is a subset of the mainstream, never leaving the mainstream, never questioning the initial story, but rather adding on to it, rather never subtracting from it. So are any of these people going to exit the world stage and take the off-world stage perspective because they see the hoaxery? That's a good question. If they don't, it's very suspect. For example, Candace Owen said there's no blood, no gore. I said there's no chance she's going to stop pushing propaganda, and I was right. So if you had any hope, you can abandon it with her. Ian Carroll, another popular conspiracy theorist. These are propagandists. So you have to recognize that the mainstream, alternative media, or MSM plus, so alt media conspiracy theorists, and this is all of them, they're not investigators. They're not researchers. They are propagandists. pushing engineered narratives to target demographics. This is 100% now. Five says, Charlie Kirk is Sloth from the Goonies. Prove me wrong. Well, the point of it here, I think that we've reached, is that this entire event was to manufacture a martyr, and they succeeded. And I was early on pointing out that they were looking for a new George Floyd. I called Austin Metcalf the right-wing Trayvon Martin, and then that girl dies in the subway, and you have all the big influencers saying, in fact, Steven Crowder, I shared this morning in the server, he's like, white America, this is your George Floyd. Charlie Kirk says the same thing, essentially. This is our moment. And now you have a martyr on the right. And so it's like, well, does he have anything to do with George Floyd? It's difficult to understand without a mind map. So put George Floyd, Charlie Kirk. Put Luigi Mangione and Daniel Penny. And so now you can see the bifurcation. How does the left wing see George Floyd or Luigi? How do they see Charlie Kirk or Daniel Penny? Well, these guys are their villains. These guys are their martyrs. These guys are fighting a class war, or this guy's a victim of class war. And both of their circumstances vindicate the perspective of woke leftism. The right wing sees this guy as a murderer and this guy as a scumbag. In fact, Charlie Kirk called George Floyd, I think he called him scum. They see Daniel Penny as a vigilante, Charlie Kirk as a saint, but they see Mangione as a murderer and Floyd as a scumbag. So there's this perfect bifurcation. One side's saint is the other side's villain and vice versa. And this is a consistent pattern. Not a coincidence that Daniel Penny gets out of jail as Luigi Mangione goes in. Not a coincidence that Floyd and Kirk have the same birthdays, which will be celebrated on the 14th by the respective sides. Antifa is planning nationwide celebrations of George Floyd's birthday to counter the new Charlie Kirk birthday holiday. Yeah, enter Colin Kaepernick, post CK. Yeah, so that's interesting too, because I had noted this. Okay, somebody also pointed out CK Clark Kent to tie in with this Superman thing, but it's all symbolism. Again, Superman in the modern movie, in the recent context, he's Christ coded, just like JFK and Charlie Kirk have been conflated together. So that's the purpose of it here. But now we have Colin Kaepernick who's talking about this Trey Reed's lynching, or supposed lynching. So he's doing another autopsy to prove it was a lynching, just as MAGA rapper comes out with, and who was at the event Sunday, who's doing a lynching rap. So you got a MAGA pro-lynching rap as Colin Kaepernick comes out with this kid named Trayvon Martin Reed, who may have been lynched. So fascinating timing for him to come out. And in my book, Metascript Decoded, I said, we're just waiting for a martyr to be killed on TV to justify censorship because of its graphic and inflammatory nature. I put that in the book. Only then I said it was going to be Kaepernick. My best guess at the time was this would be a perfect martyr for the left, and it would incite something, and it would justify censorship, and it would be inflammatory. But we got a different CK. But it's the same basic template, is what I'm pointing out. Flatlander Montgomery says, Happy Rapture Day. Yeah, I'm waiting. I haven't seen anybody take off yet. No empty houses, untended dogs. Like, they're leaving a lot behind. Lost Age says, these things are so sloppy, you think they would want us to see the fakery. If you don't want to see inconsistencies, it's on you because they put it out there. So that's a very good point. Because for a long time, people have said they want us to see this stuff. There's like good guys, there's white hats, and they're winking at us. They're trying to let us know. And I've never liked that notion. But it's undeniable they want us to see stuff. They're planting stuff. They're planting plausible multiple shooter scenarios. Why is that? That's because conspiracy theories are part of the engineered narrative. They're part of the psyop. The meta conspiracy of flooding the zone with conspiracy theories to control the narrative. So that's mostly that is 100% the case. It's low-hanging fruit, red herrings, truther bait, time-wasting rabbit trails. It's part of the design. And what all the conspiracy theories they promote have in common is they assume the person died or the people died. They assume the essential reality of the event in every case. So yes, they want us to run behind the conspiracy theories like Candace Owens, and that leaves us vulnerable because when you follow them, guess what? They can debunk you at any time. They can discredit you 24/7 in front of the mainstream. They can make you look batshit insane. So if you run with their conspiracy theories, it's sabotage. They're sabotaging the free thinkers, saddling them down with unsolvable, unprovable, and false conspiracies. That's why I say the red pill community are a bunch of propaganda mules. That's why I said we have to leave Trutherville, because they're always taking the bait. Because it's too much for them to think that a death would be faked on TV. It's like, it's standard atrocity propaganda. Death fakery is their stock in trade. Inflated body counts. That's what they do. So you have to keep it all in context. Like when you figure out the death of Ashley Babbitt was faked, or that there's no deaths in any of these events, these things become less challenging to accept. You have to start rejecting the premise that the mainstream is telling the truth automatically. You cannot be a low info believer and ever arrive at the truth. You cannot be an alternative news believer and arrive at the truth. You got to stop being a believer in media. Imagine media is just a state church and it's global and it pretends to be something other than mere church. But if you saw that ceremony on Sunday, it was pure religion. They have fused it. Religion, media, and politics are actually part of a whole. They're part of the same op. They have the same agenda. But when you start looking at these events as creations of myths, contemporary myths, and miracles. So the event itself is a myth. It's a fake event, but it's been grafted onto our historical narrative. That's why I call it the meta script. Our history is actually a script. It's planned in advance. It's acted out on the world stage with these contemporary myths. But some of them are actually miracles, like landing on the moon is probably a miracle. Miracles validate the belief system. And these are things that prove that they're right. Kirk and State, says Lean Dion. Yeah, his name means church. His first name, Charles, means what, free or something? But church. Lost Age says, ChatGPT says that drills happen on 9/11 are suspicious, but just a coincidence. Yeah, so ChatGPT, so you got the mainstream worldview, the world stage. ChatGPT, that's its point of view. Its point of view is mainstream. Everything that it gets is going to assume the validity of the mainstream perspective. The conspiracy theorists are a subset, which I call MSM plus because they add on a bunch of stuff. But they don't reject the central premise. So their point of view is, this is all true, but these guys are lying. My perspective is correct. You will never get the truth out of either of these as far as objective truth. You'll get compliance with the consensus. You'll get agreement with the consensus version of events. It's not the same thing as truth. To arrive at the truth, you have to subtract the lies and work your way up from there. That's why I call our perspective, the off-world stage, MSM minus. It's the subtractive route. Plain Dakota says, don't forget this was astrologically timed. It came after a lunar eclipse. The ceremony ritual was on the solar eclipse. Solar eclipse, new moon. Also 9/22, the first day of the fall. It's the equinox. And 8/22 was the date that Ierna Zardusky, the subway killing, happened. Her death was 8/22, and I said at the time, that is suspicious that we go into Virgo. Virgo's Persephone, and we often see the Virgo spring maiden Persephone kidnapped symbolically in time for the fall, which is the myth. We saw it with Gabby Petito. It was reinforced with Princess Diana documentaries coming out in August. Like, they always reinforce the idea of the spring maiden, usually blonde, going into the underworld as we enter Virgo, because we're about to hit the fall. And when I saw the image of the stabber, I was like, that's Pluto. That's Hades. Hades about to take the spring maiden into the underworld, and they're in a subway. So I was looking at this as possibly a reenactment of one of the mysteries, because the mystery schools do these plays to reenact the cycles of nature, to personify them. And one of the more popular ones is the myth of Persephone. So I kind of took it to be, and look, Gabby Petito was 100% Virgo coded, the whole thing. So when I saw the image of her, this iconic image of the girl on the subway, blonde, being stabbed, I thought that's got to be likely tied into the myth just because of the timing. I mean, that's what my point is, that beyond the political utility of the psyops, you often find what people call the occult side, the ritualistic aspects, which are another aspect altogether. Maybe one of our Zoom conferences will talk about the mysteries as they apply to the Super Bowl. We'll start on that one first because that one's pretty blatant. It's just another area of research that you don't necessarily have to believe what they believe, but it's worth noticing, or at least paying attention to, the symbolism, because it's a whole other language that's communicated over our heads. But I think that everything that is targeted at us propaganda-wise gets processed, whether it's peripheral information or not. It's just a question of, do we consciously recognize it, or does it bypass our conscious awareness and go directly into our subconscious? And if it does, that happens to fit the theory of magic in terms of sigil magic, and the idea that in order to tap into it, they have to bypass the psychic censor of the ego. They have to use symbolism and archetypes to speak to the deep mind. So we could be taking in a lot of content without even being aware of it. That it's not just going into a trash bin, but maybe it's building up into some kind of internal structures. The book Virus of the Mind by Richard Brody, who wrote the original Word, which is all intriguing if you get into Word and computer viruses as an analogy for mind viruses. But he wrote about how belief systems can be acquired passively. And he didn't coin it, but he refined mind viruses. And I think there's some truth to it. I don't believe in mind viruses in the sense that I could passively catch something because I'm critically thinking. However, if I wasn't a critical thinker, I would be passively accepting a lot of things. So yes, mind viruses do in fact exist until you've been inoculated. I've been inoculated. Flatlander says, to what end? Power over us? Jack Posobiec gave it away. He says, in 100 years, when they write the history on this, or they look back on the history, they're going to say the turning point where the West rose up to save itself from destruction against globalism and the left, the turning point for Western civilization is the death of Charlie Kirk. So they're writing history. And why do they write history? It's because who controls the past controls the future. History is lies agreed upon. Napoleon Bonaparte. So in other words, it's just like a religion. It's for control. They control us en masse by the billions by controlling our belief systems and manipulating our world stage, knowing that believers will respond in predictable ways. Thank you, Sunkworks Extra says, the subconscious does not have an off switch. Exactly. And they know this. That's why they use archetypes. That's why they use symbolism. That's why the religiosity is so apparent in this one. Some bishop got some flack for calling Charlie Kirk a St. Paul or something. But this thing's not going away. He was hyped up on South Park to elevate his media profile to people who had never heard of him so they could respond accordingly. And that's why you had so many visceral responses of hate towards him. Because Eric Cartman has the association, of course, of Hitler and KKK. They really demonized him at the end on purpose. Yeah, thank you. Jack Posobiec did call it a sacrifice. He called it a sacrifice. And these are all the individuals who conspicuously converted into Christianity in recent years, like even Candace Owens. They're not real Christians. They're this politicized bastardization of Christianity that they're using to tap into Christian believers and turn them into essentially not just voters, but it's this new ideology. But again, it's not just religion here. It's not just spirituality. And I saw like 100,000 people shedding tears. No, actually, it was 99,999 because Erica Kirk wasn't really crying. But most of those people there are genuine. Good hearts, good intentions. There's children out there. I am Charlie Kirk. I'm like, what? There's no way they can know the full import of that. So they're being taken advantage of. And this is why I equate these things. I'm like, I don't trust religion any more than I trust politics or media because it's all the same. And if it wasn't obvious, now it should be. You had all the fakers up there, all the reality fakers. Elon Musk was there with his fake car in space. You have to maintain a continuity here. When you look at these events, nothing's in isolation. You're in a forest of fakery. So you can't just talk about 9/11 for 20 years like a lot of people have. No, 9/11 has everything to do with JFK, with Apollo 11, with mass shootings. It has everything to do with Charlie Kirk. These things are all interconnected. These are contiguous events because these are historic events, and the Charlie Kirk assassination is highly significant, historically speaking. Probably the most significant assassination sociopolitically since JFK. I'm wondering now if that Marilyn Manson album, One Assassination Under God, that he's touring with right now, was a foreshadowing for this. He was hinting at, or rather, he had predictive programming for the JFK Jr. death inherent in his video where JFK is being worshipped as the second coming, called Coma White. And he more or less apologized for the timing of his video coming out with JFK Jr.'s death. He's like, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Lasers Go Pew Pew says, I'm Gnostic formally. Yeah, I can understand that. This is sort of neo-Gnosticism. This is something of what we're doing here is it's a minor intellectual revolt. Like, I'd like to say this is a neo-enlightenment, and it could expand to encompass enough people to where we have this sort of intellectual breakaway. The off-world stage has a real foothold. That's possible, but I think I think the most likely outcome here is the psyops are going to get better, and we are going to be a blip on the radar. Because what are we going to do, like long term, with this? When the visuals, when the psyops get so good that it becomes unchallengeable. But we'll see. There's still time. Dark Ghost Wind says, oh, that's right. There's quite a lot with Manson. We'll have to talk about him later. Dark Ghost Wind says, it could be possible that Kirk is foreshadowing for Trump's assassination, but that's heresy. Yeah, I'm really kind of on the fence now as to whether Butler was all we're going to get. Like, maybe that was the head wound that the predictive programming built up for, and it was just anticlimactic. Because it would be inconsistent for them to do it again. It would be redundant because they dropped all the programming when that happened. Like, I'm wondering, maybe Charlie Kirk is the big one that we were waiting for. Dark Ghost Wind says we demand better psyops. Yeah, we should have a protest. Maybe that's what we should do. Maybe we should hit the streets and we should protest. We demand better fake events, better psyops, better crisis actors, more believable scripts. Stop being so predictable. Your predictive programming is a little obvious. Like, we should demand better psyops. I almost want to sue the Government Actors Guild. Like, this is our money. Our taxpayer-funded psyops are terrible. Greg Jones says Charlie Kirk is a nobody. Yeah, that's your uninformed opinion. You're talking about the co-founder of the largest conservative political action committee who went to thousands of events, speaking to thousands of audiences that were antagonistic to him, doing these debates, popularizing this whole thing, the whole prove me wrong thing. And then he had a long-running podcast. If you don't know who Charlie Kirk is, you're just not paying attention to mainstream politics, which I understand. But I do pay attention and have. So I was well apprised of who he was. And in 2020, I really took note of the Turner Diaries because it was being pushed onto the world stage. And then I realized, wait, Turning Point USA is platforming Turner Diaries. And Turner Diaries is about this critical moment, the turning point, when the white nationalist Christians have to rise up against the New World Order. And that was the book that inspired McVeigh. So to say that he's a nobody is a little out of touch with the reality, especially when you look at the more than 60,000 new chapters of TP USA opening up. Or the fact that, I mean, even Trump said that the ground game of Charlie Kirk and TP USA is what got him elected. So we got to be accurate. You know, the beginning of wisdom is the ability to call things by their right names. If something looks fake, call it fake. If it doesn't look fake, say it looks real. But, you know, reality denialism is not going to help. And the fact is, like I had someone say, oh, let's not pay attention to this. This is a waste of time. Nobody knows who Charlie Kirk is. I'm like, no, just wait. Everybody's going to be chanting that name in a few days. Yeah, I read the Miles Mathis about the shooting, and he said it's meant to foment a civil war. And I agree with him 100% on his overall assessment. I question his methodology's efficacy. I don't think that looking in the phone book to find out who people are related to is how you find out something's fake. And these days, it's easy to call it fake. So, you know, he's great, but he's not a full-blown auto-hoaxer. I don't hold it against people. You know, I'm going to get out of the truck. It might be cooler out here. I don't want the phone to overheat. But Miles Mathis is always there on these events, and his commentary is pretty good when it comes to not trusting the media and what the purpose of the psyops are. I always look at the psyop utility. Yeah, and when it comes to the Civil War thing, it's not going to be people on the streets. That's never going to happen, in my view. Like, if there is a Civil War, we're going to have curfews, and it's going to be done in a staged way, out of sight, out of mind. And most people will see AI videos and video game fights, and they'll think that's the real thing. So no. But it's the Civil War in the culture war is being inflamed. Like, one of my predictions is 1014. Watch 1014, because the culture war is going to be exacerbated with the celebration of Charlie Kirk as a saint by the right, while the left thinks that he's a racist devil. And then George Floyd's birthday will be celebrated, who is a saint to the left and a devil to the right. And I'm not saying that these sides are equal. They're polarized. But obviously, the guy who put a gun at the belly of a pregnant woman's not a saint. Nor is Charlie Kirk a racist, in the sense of being, in the sense that they think. He is in the sense of woke leftism's definition of racism, where you're born racist and there, you know, but, you know, again, the bifurcation is full on display, which is another hoax indicator. So I have an auto hoax axiom. One of them is, if any of these psyops has a perfectly split down the middle, bifurcated interpretation left and right, it's a fake event. And this fits that pattern as well. Anx G says, Kirkianity, he died for us. I even heard them saying that. Take your phone case off. It's like having my phone's having a heat stroke. If someone has a heat stroke, you gotta take their shoes off. Unbutton their shirt. Well, I'm out here on the far west side of town where we got these giant red ants. You know, I read somewhere that I think it's the red ants, I think their bite is not as painful as the harvester ants, the ones with the big black heads. And those ones I think are more painful than bee stings, but what would Charlie do? Bracelets and shirts. Yeah, somebody should put those to market right now. Make a lot of money. I thought about cashing in on this, to be honest. Greg Jones says, every major event has been simulated. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Because that's the main thing. We're not saying everything's fake. Some people will try to straw man us, and they'll say, oh, you guys say everything's fake. No. You guys say everything's real, and that's a terrible operating system. There should be some nuance. No, I'm not saying everything's fake. I'm saying all of the majorly promoted, historically significant events are fake. There's a difference, because there aren't as many of those. So it's a minority of the news that's fake. However, it is this minority that's the loudest minority, and it takes all the air in the room, it hogs the spotlight, and it drives the rest of the news, and everything else bounces off of it under the presupposition that it's real. So fake trumps real. At least for most people. Those of us who have stepped off the world stage don't suffer from that delusion. T-Dog says, I got stung by a caterpillar a few weeks ago. I didn't know they stung. Thanks for letting me know. You prevented a future caterpillar stinging. Dark Ghost Wind says, when you start talking about magic bracelet guns or how Israel is somehow behind it to legitimize your bias, you have to question whether you're in a psyop or not. Yeah. Yeah, and okay, so the difference, you got the shooter on the window, the shooter in the sewer, you got the bracelet gun, you got the camera gun, and then you got Flat Earth Dave, who apparently got tired of hypnotizing old ladies in nursing homes to convince them that they were taught the earth was flat when they were kids. So Flat Earth Dave is out there saying that Charlie Kirk's a hologram. So they'll go with all of these different narratives that flood the zone, muddy the waters, remove objectivity, and there's no reality testing for any of these claims. The second shooter is not new. They did, okay, InfoWars. So when Trump gets shot, InfoWars, Owen Schroyer, he's out there and he's saying, it was the shooter on the water tower. The other guy's a patsy. And the second shooter theories, and this is everything, every single psyop, it's always pointing at Israel. Why is that? And so the main, now we talk about the fringes, but the mainstream have a mainstream interpretation that's worth mentioning. So like the fringe says that George Floyd was, killed by systemic racism, and it was a hateful act by Derek Chauvin. It was like, that was the point of it. Whereas the mainstream is like, no, he was following protocol. It was an accident. But then the fringe right will say, no, he overdosed. I mean, you see how subjective it is. I mean, it depends on where you are on the political spectrum as to how you're going to interpret these events. Boxes within boxes. All right, let's see what else we have here. Hot Lost Age says, have we considered that the city of London, Britain, is behind all the psyops as well as the planet Netflix? Yeah, one of the things I'm happy about this event is that the Hulu thing, the show The Tempest, shows that the PSYOP entertainment complex is global. It's monolithic and it's global. It's not like the American media psyops us and everybody else isn't in this bubble. No, this is everybody. And you can see the reach of this psyop, where the youth Christian Republican organizations in South Korea are all praying for Charlie Trump before he even dies. Like, when did he become some kind of a saint? Like, since when do you bring these political polemicists, these podcasters, onto a stage and pray at them like they're on a holy mission? See, this was already starting. They were already doing the Jesus-ification, and that's what the Health Ranger called it, the Jesus Christification of Charlie Kirk. They already begun that process. Anyway, if you got my newsletter, what I did was I took the 4-hour-long conversation we had, and I said, give me the best 20 hoax indicators and a synopsis. And it gave me a pretty good list. It might not even be exhaustive. But we're going to do Zoom conferences pretty much every week. Lean Dion says, I was confused as to the Tempest thing until I saw he was in South Korea just before. Yeah, and that's strange, is that not only was he in South Korea getting prayed for, but the group that was praying for him, that youth Christian Republican group, was basically the template or the basis for the party, the new Republican Party in the TV show. So he literally played the role, or he acted out in real life, the role that mirrored his real death. I mean, this is an incredible merging of real and fake. One of the best examples of concurrent programming. This is what I mentioned, the idea of, it was Baudrillard who talked about hyperreal. Hyperreality is when the superimposed map of reality that's infused with media is so merged with the real thing that it become indistinguishable. And that's what they've done. And so it's enough that they shot him in the neck on the opening episode on the day that it happened. That alone nails it as that's a hoax indicator. But the fact that now it's tracking with Erica Kirk and her speech crying in front of everybody, so it's tracking so well that I think it's safe to say that there's reason to think that nukes are going to hit the world stage. Submarine, like Hunt for Red October style alarmism is likely to occur. Like there's a broken arrow, a missing nuke, or something like that. All right, well, I pushed it kind of far. We're here for more than an hour. Let me go ahead and kill it before the phone overheats. We'll catch up